Hi, I'm Amy Ketchum,
And I'm Amy Casio.
and you're listening to the AA Horror Highway, where we talk about horror. And today we're going to talk about It Follows from 2014.
It was made on a $2 million budget, but it ended up making $23 million. It started out as a limited release, but it was so successful that about a couple weeks later, they gave it a wide release. And so the director is David Robert Mitchell. So here's the plot summary for It Follows, for anybody who needs a refresher or hasn't seen the movie and doesn't know what it's about. In the wake of sleeping with a handsome stranger, Jay quickly learns that she has inherited a most unusual curse. Wherever she goes, lumbering half-naked phantoms follow, and their singular goal is to see her dead. Desperate, Jay turns to her younger sister and loyal circle of friends for help. In time, however, Jay learns that her only hope for escaping death is to sleep with someone else and pass the curse on. But the pursuing phantoms are invisible to Jay's friends, and it soon becomes apparent that her time is running out. Now, with death closing in, Jay will be forced to make a difficult decision if she hopes to survive her terrifying ordeal. How did you discover the movie?
Well,
And what was your first watch like? Like, what did you think?
I honestly don't remember how I discovered it. Usually what happens for me is I will see a commercial for a horror movie, and I will text my sister, and we will make a plan to go see as many horror movies as we can. So this was on that list. I remember seeing the commercial and thinking that it just looked amazing. But I actually think I watched it first at home, probably from a screener. I think it was, pretty early on, so it was still in the theater. And I was not impressed. I remember being completely let down. I had such high expectations that always gets me in trouble.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was not impressed. And I remember talking to you about it, and you're like, this is amazing. What? And so I went back and watched it a couple more times, and then I was like, oh, now I get it. This is art.
Yeah.
This is not just a movie. There's a lot going on here. So I'm glad we're talking about it today.
Yeah, I remember feeling really sad when you were like, I don't like this movie, because I really liked it. I can't remember why I discovered it. I probably saw a trailer for it because I then went to the movie theater to see it. It was at the cheap theater at that point, so it was $4 to go see it, and I was like, we have to go see this. And I do still have my ticket stub because I loved it so much. Yeah, I just enjoyed watching it so much. I enjoyed the cinematography. I was in love with the cinematography, and I was in love with the music because I love synth music, especially 80s synth sounding stuff, and I was like, this is incredible what they're doing with this.
I think it's a really important movie. I think it's very different.
Yeah, it felt very original to me when I saw it. I felt like I hadn't seen anything like this before, which is kind of hard in horror.
And I think as far as the music, when I was doing my rewatch in preparation of today, I think for me the music being so ethereal, and it just feels like a warm spring day, carefree. There's no dread. There's no horror lurking in the shadows. So to me, it actually gives you an uneasy feeling, that everything's wonderful, but you're watching a horror movie. So something's going to happen. So I think that actually really stuck with me more than if they would have had, a really edgy, dark, driving style of music. It was actually more unsettling to me to feel so calm and peaceful. I mean, and it's throughout the whole movie. All the way through, we have that nice, pretty synth.
Yeah, I mean, there's one specific song which I think maybe you're probably talking about, Jay's theme. It's they play that a lot, which is it sounds like what you're describing.
Yeah.
And we should say that is all by one guy in his band, I suppose you want to say, is called Disaster Piece. And I guess the director he's a gamer, and so he played this game. I think it was called Fez, Fez. And Disaster Piece, the guy from Disaster Piece, made the music for that game, and so he like fell in love with that music, and then that's when he was like, I want you to do music for a movie that I'm making, and then they worked it out, which is great because it's fantastic. I think a couple summers ago I was just like riding in my car listening to the soundtrack as the sun was going down, making myself feel really creepy.
That's kind of creepy, yeah.
Yeah. So we could talk about the cinematography.
All right, let's talk about cinematography.
Well, for me, when I saw it, that was like one of the first things that I noticed. There's like an opening scene, and it felt very much like Halloween to me, where like all of the leaves are out, like it's fall, and like the wide angle shot that he's doing. And the director actually said he was inspired by John Carpenter. And you might enjoy this. His favorite movie of all time is Rear Window by Alfred Hitchcock.
I sensed that was coming. Well, I don't mean to jump ahead, but it just brings up when they're at the movie theater and the sign says they're watching Charade. That movie is actually labeled as the best Alfred Hitchcock movie that he never made. Like, people just love the cinematography. So it's kind of interesting that that you say he's inspired by Hitchcock and Rear Window, because, Hitchcock is the master of cinematography.
And I have never heard of that movie, so did you learn anything about that movie?
Well, I actually have not seen Charade. I do love Audrey Hepburn, but I've not seen that one. So I was just looking into it as far as, what relates back to this movie. And the only thing I could come up with is that they are being chased by 3 different men that they don't know, that are after them for money that they don't know about. So it's kind of very loose there. So I don't know if the movie itself is tied in. Maybe it's the cinematography that they enjoyed. Not really for sure why they would use Charade, of all movies, for the young 20-somethings to go to the movie theater to see.
Well, I think that can tie into the next part of it, which is how the movie makes you feel very uneasy, and you can't tell what decade you're in, because everything is just, it's so scattered. It's like you see old technology and new technology, old looking 70s furniture. The seasons feel like they're it's like, is it summer? Is it fall? Is it winter? Because you have scenes where characters, like there's one scene when Jay and her sister are like walking down the street, and the sister is, I think her name is Kelly. She's wearing like a button-up shirt with a t-shirt, and it's just unbuttoned, and she's wearing shorts. And next to her, Jay is like totally bundled up in like a coat and a scarf, jeans, boots. And you're just like, what's happening? Like, it just makes you feel really uneasy.
Is that the same scene where they wave at the neighbor washing his car? Because then that would throw you back into summer.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, then the neighbor, he's out there washing his car. His old car, it's an old car, right? Because that's another thing, is there's a lot of old cars and new cars.
Mm-hmm.
And then like with the swimming, Jay is often back there swimming in that pool, and it just looks like it's too cold to be swimming. But there she is in that pool, and you're just like, what weather is this? It's weird. And did you have some thoughts about the pool?
I view it as naive, carefree. She's very relaxed. There's nobody swimming with her. It's just part of her day. So it's just like this, even though they're obviously not rich, it's a pretty average suburb. It's like a luxury, That's how I view it. That it's kind of this naive moment where it's not like she's taking her life for granted, but she's just used to it. It's just her everyday life. She's carefree, she's relaxed, she's chilling in the pool. No big deal, just another day.
Yeah. He said that the pool kind of represents like a safe place, and sort of like, I don't know that he said innocence, but like maybe youth, like being young and you're not quite like an adult yet, and you just have like this safe space. And I have to say that he doesn't give away really any details about what this movie is about. Like, he will say that certain things have meaning, but he's not going to tell you the meaning because he wants it all to be up to your own interpretation, which is, I think it works in the favor of the movie to, like, let us just figure it out. Because there are some movies where they give you too many details and then it stops making sense. But I do like with this one specifically how it's pretty vague, so it's up to your own interpretation, and it's not really locked into anything. As far as the rules of the monster, it's like, you know, the only way that we find out the rules is just from somebody else who has experienced it, so we're only getting his experience, what he has seen. Jeff. Is it Jeff? Jeff/Hugh. But we're only getting, like, what he's seen of it, so we don't really know what the rules are, other than, like, what he has said and what we're seeing. So it's really all up to your own interpretation.
I kind of felt like when they met with Jeff, you know, when we have our only comedic moment in the whole movie, where he flips out and says, "Can you see her? Can you see her?" And there's a girl walking by with a soccer ball. And they're like, "Yeah." Mm-hmm. I kind of felt like that scene maybe allowed our main character to think, does he know what he's talking about? You know, is this guy just kind of out there? Because all they have to go by is what he has said. They don't know anything else. They just know what this person has said, a person who they didn't even know his real identity until they went and searched for him. You know, what if he's wrong? What if he's just kind of cuckoo? You know, I kind of felt that, just a little bit of that. I mean, when Jay's in the chair, when he ties her up and she wakes up and she's in the chair and the woman is walking towards her, he's telling her that, you know, basically only she can see this. But how does she know that's really true? Right?
Yeah.
It's just them there. No one else is there to say, no, I can't see it. And then they're with Jeff and he's saying, can you guys see her? And they can see her. So if I were Jay, I would be starting to question and doubt what he's telling me. So I felt like even though she was in fear, you know, she had fear of this thing, it wasn't until she started seeing things and her friends could not see them that she truly understood what this was, you know, that she had to run, that it really was happening to her. I felt like there was, between them meeting with Jeff and when they actually when she saw the first thing in the house, there was like, it was really kind of normal. It wasn't heightened awareness or fear.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine what it would feel like to be in that situation at all. To be like, this thing happened to her and this guy did what he did to her and you just don't know if it's real or not, and then you're like completely freaked out. I can't imagine. And maybe that's part of why it's like really horrifying. I mean, that's, you know, that's what the director said, is that this movie is really about like having this sense of dread. From what I read, he said it's kind of like based off of like how he would have these anxiety dreams as a kid, and it would just be nothing but dread and something following him and he couldn't get away. And so that's kind of like the feeling that he wanted to put into this movie. And that this movie is really like dream logic, so you can't really make sense of it in the way that you might want to, like in the real world, because it's dream logic. So, you know, you get the weird seasons and like the technology that's all over the place and the cars, and I think even some of the people, how they dress, they look like they're from different eras, and it just feeds into that sense of unease, and you're just like, what's happening? You just can never feel comfortable. Even if something bad isn't happening, you still feel uneasy because the scenery is just so off.
So let's go back to that opening scene. We see the wide road, we see the tree-lined road. Feels like Halloween. Mm-hmm. When she runs out of the house, we know nothing. She has on high heels and either some type of nighty short top combo, or maybe it's something that she's worn underneath a fancy night outfit, night on the town outfit. So she has the high heels on.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, like, what was she doing? Was she about to get into bed, or because it doesn't look like it's late enough to get
Right.
into bed. So it's just, but yeah, go on.
Or was she in bed with somebody else who just passed it on to her? And now they've told her what's happening to her.
I haven't thought about it like that. But that's a great scene. I mean, I love
Yeah.
that scene.
Yeah, I did. I enjoyed it because they just throw us right in.
Yeah.
And she's dressed peculiarly.
And the high heels. Like, I don't understand the high heels.
Right. So she must have been undressing. And so in this scene, she's running down the road. The neighbor's saying, "Are you okay?" Her father's saying, "Are you okay?" Or so, I don't know exactly what he says to her. And then she goes back into the house and she grabs her purse and she gets in her car.
Because that's a 360 shot. And
Yeah.
I always want to know, why did she run out into the middle of the road? Like what
Right.
happened? She
Right.
runs into the middle of the road. She's just staring at her house. Does she see something on the roof? And then
Right.
what happened there?
Right. And why did we not see it? If we see what they see later, why did we not see what she saw? So maybe it was something in her house. She ran out and then she felt like, oh, I can run back real quick and get my keys and leave. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just really freaky. But that would lead us into the
Dun,
next
da, da,
scene
da.
on the beach, which I love.
The award-winning scene.
Yeah, we give this scene an award for, well, we give it like the best opening scene, and also it's a great kill scene.
Yeah, it's just gnarly. That's a good word for it.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. It's like, so if you notice, it seems like bad things are always happening by bodies of water. So she goes to the water, and she's making a call to her dad saying that she loves him. And maybe this has been going on for a long time and she just finally got sick of it, because she's like, "I love you," and she just lets it, I mean, I assume she's just letting it take over her. Like, she just gave in because she knows that it exists because she's running, but she just goes to the beach and she just lets it happen. She must be sick of running.
In the opening scene, it also, we end with her death. That's how it ends, and it kind of reminds me of other classics, other great horror classics, such as Scream. At the beginning of each of the Screams, I believe there is a very specific little storyline that's not attached to the rest of the movie. Is that
like a
for all
cold
the
opening?
Screams? Yeah, right. So, I mean, when Scream came out, not to switch gears here, but when Scream came out and it was advertised as Drew Barrymore was going to be in this movie. I remember that specifically. Mm-hmm. And when you see Scream, she's only in that opening scene. Yeah. And it really just confuses you and gets you excited, and you just can't wait to see the rest of it. And that was kind of how I felt with It Follows, that it was confusing, but it gets your attention. And it just, leaves you wanting more, It makes you excited to see the rest of the movie.
Yeah. And like the way that she's killed is it's just terrifying. It's like her body is broken and twisted, and you don't know what happened because they don't show it. It's just like they just cut to her in that way, and it's just horrifying. And then we cut to like the regular story, like the real story.
So what we're experiencing in the introduction, opening scene, whatever you may want to call it, and then later on is how comfortable this neighborhood is. Like, you just can't get over it, like you want to live there, It's that feeling of comfort. And you have this lovely synth music, Jay's theme, that's, just lulling you. And you just feel comfortable and relaxed. And another thing I noticed is that there's not a lot of dialogue. There is obviously some dialogue, but it's very minimal. It's more of a suspense movie. It's more of, the cinematography, looking out into their surroundings. What do you see? I caught myself looking for it often when it wasn't there, because I was just in that state of mind to just keep looking for it.
Yeah.
So I felt like it's so comfortable. You're in this very comfortable neighborhood where everybody knows everybody. You've got a group of close-knit friends. But every time they go to the water, it doesn't seem like a good thing.
Yeah, bad things. bad things happen at the water. Even when Jay's in her pool and it's like supposed to be innocent or I don't know, whatever. Like she still has like neighbor kids spying on her, but she's like, I don't know. She just seems like she's okay, and she's just like, I see you, and then they just like run away, and it's like whatever.
Right. Right. It's like you're back in the 70s and where everything is just much more laid back and everyone is just friendly. Everyone knows each other.
Friendly neighborhood spies.
Right. Friendly neighborhood peeping toms. But they don't seem to bother her.
Yeah. There is a deleted scene on the DVD where the kid is like, there's more scenes of them spying on her and they cut them out. So I wonder what they were trying to do with that. Like it's a thing where they keep spying on her.
Right. And I actually did not notice that at all. But now that you mention it, where she's in the bathroom and the red ball hits the window, she looks out, she sees the red ball in the yard. And then after the camera moves to the outside the house, you see a kid peeking in the bathroom window.
Yeah.
Creepy. So it is pretty creepy. Let's talk about the movie theater. So Jay meets this guy, and they're going to go see a movie. And did I miss something? Do we know how they met? Or anything?
I don't think we do. I think we're just dropped into her life, and she's just going out on a date with some guy.
You're right.
But that is a good question.
I think it starts with them in line at the movie. That's where we shift. And she says she wants to play this game where they pick somebody, someone that they would switch lives with. And he picks a little boy. And he says he would want to be the little boy because he has his whole life ahead of him. And she thinks it's pretty ridiculous. Like she doesn't quite understand why he would pick the little boy. So to me, that was a little bit of foreshadowing, just a little touch of what's to come, that he himself knows that it follows and he may not feel like he has much of a life ahead of him.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that youthful feeling where he wants to stay young and innocent. It's sort of like before, because, okay, do we want to talk about this? Do we want to get into the STD? Is it an STD thing? Is it not? But yeah, it's up for interpretation. The director is not being specific, of course. But what he would say is that this is about the transition to adulthood. So, like, if you have sex, then it's sort of like, you know, you've lost a certain innocence and you've now transitioned into adulthood. And sex is one way that you can... that happens. And so when I watched the movie, I didn't personally, like, I mean, when I was watching it for the first time, I was like, it kind of seems like it's, you know, about STDs, but it also kind of doesn't. It seems like that's just too easy, that there's some kind of deeper meaning, because it's I mean, STDs don't exactly work that way, where like you have sex with somebody and you get rid of the STD temporarily. Like that's not really how it works. It's kind of like you have sex to get rid of it. I don't know. It just doesn't, for me, it doesn't work for it to be about STDs. It just seems like it's a deeper meaning, but I'm not quite sure what that meaning is. It seems like it's something else.
Right. To me, that's our high level interpretation. Now, honestly, when I first watched the movie, maybe I'm a little dense, but I didn't even pick up on that. As far as the STD, it took a couple watchings before I was like, oh, they're having sex. They're passing it on. But for me, I felt that that's still a high-level interpretation. That would be the most common interpretation because it's so in our face. It's so obvious. Yeah. That it's a physical action happening. And then he immediately tells her, oh, now, by the way, you have it. It's with you. It follows you.
Yeah, so we should talk about that scene then, where he passes it along to her, because that scene, I think that's a great scene, and that's a really creepy scene when they are having sex in the car in the dark. I mean, I love that scene. I love the car. I love the poster for that shot because they turned that shot into. I mean, I believe that might even be like the DVD cover. I can't remember right now, right, but it's a great shot.
The eyes in the rearview mirror. I believe that is one of the covers.
Yeah, that's the cover that reminds me of a Fear Street book.
What are Fear Street books?
But yeah, I used to read Fear Street books all the time in the 90s because those are some young adult horror books from R.L. Stine. This is like right before he started doing the Goosebump books. And I was really into those. And Christopher Pike was also making his version of the young adult horror books, but I was totally into R.L. Stine. But that poster of her in the rear view, like looking in the rearview mirror, I love that poster. It's fantastic. I have made art out of that poster. Yeah, I love that scene because because we still don't know what's going to happen. And so they're in the car alone in the dark in a forest. And we're just like, what's going to happen? They have sex. It seems like something horrible is going to happen. But then they finish and, nothing horrible has happened. And so you might be kind of, not as nervous, but you're still kind of nervous. And it's still kind of weird.
But then something else happens. She's leaning outside the car, and her hand, with her red fingernail polish, is touching a flower that's growing up in the concrete. It's growing up through a crack, which I feel is foreshadowing for sure. I think we've had several moments of foreshadowing in the first 15 minutes of this movie. So at about 15 minutes, that's where we're at right now, where she's touching the flower. So to me, it represents that it can't survive. It's growing in a place that it cannot survive. It's not in its natural habitat. It's not growing in the soil. It's growing through the concrete. So I feel like that's kind of what's happening with the characters, is that their natural habitat is the suburbs. That's their comfort. They're safe. They know everybody. But when they leave it, when she's out having sex in the car, or when they're out at the movie, that they're no longer in these safe environments. They are the flower growing up through the concrete.
Yeah.
They simply cannot survive outside of their very isolated, safe environment that they don't realize that they're really even in, I don't think. It's just their day-to-day life. They don't even realize it. And then he chloroforms her.
Right. Yeah. So then, yeah. She's just laying there, and then he's doing some stuff in the back, and then he chloroforms her. And then that's when the movie really changes, and it gets going, and she wakes up in this broken building, tied to a wheelchair, in just her, underwear, and he gagged her too, right? I can't remember.
I believe he's got something tied around her mouth, yeah. And her arms are tied to the wheelchair.
How terrifying is that? And he's scanning, because they're in a broken building and there's a lot of different openings. And so he's going to each opening and kind of scanning with a flashlight. And he just looks like he's tweaked out. And then he starts explaining the rules to her.
Right. And at this point, it kind of feels like he's a good guy. It kind of feels like he's trying to explain something to her to help her.
Yeah, it's very confusing because you're like, oh, they had consensual sex, and he seems like a nice guy, but really, he knows what he's doing, is he's passing along this curse. But it's also in his own interest to explain to her how to stay away so that he doesn't get killed, because if she can't survive, then he's not going to survive. So it's really all kind of selfish if you really think about it deeply. He just looks like a nice guy on the surface, but he's got the secret identity. He's lied to her. I mean, there's better ways to go about this than chloroforming somebody and tying them to a chair in the middle of the night in a broken building alone. So he's walking around explaining the rules, saying that it's passed through sex, that it can look like anyone, that it moves very slow but it's not dumb, and it kills the last person that it's infected, and then it kind of moves back up the chain. And to always have multiple exits so that you can get out if you need to. But basically, we're only learning about the rules through his own experience, through what he's seen, so we don't really know what the rules are for sure. It's just his experience and then what we see in the movie. But it starts walking up to them, it finally comes, and she sees it. It's a naked woman. And that's a recurring theme here, is that the monster is often naked. And the director said that it is very important to make note of the fact that they are naked, because he's kind of trying to say something about how our culture in America views nudity and sexuality as something to be fearful of, which is very true. Our country is not a fan of sex or talking about sex or like nudity. It's all very like hush hush, which is completely ridiculous. And so you've got these monsters in quotation marks coming after you, and they're naked, and that's part of the fear, because you're just like, why is it naked coming after me? It's not, is it always? I don't think it's always naked, but most of the time it's naked or partially naked.
Right.
We can see from this scene that he can walk up to it and it's not going to affect him, because it's only after the last person that was infected or cursed. It's just creepy, because you still really don't know what's happening at this point. So then, yeah, he explains those rules to her, and then he rolls her away back into the car. And, if you want to talk about a nice guy, he's not, because he just dumps her out of the car in the middle of the road without her clothes and just peels off into the night. Not a nice guy. I do want to say that if you pay attention, you'll see that pink, the color pink, kind of foreshadows things about to happen. The characters are often like wearing pink before something's going to happen. So she's in pink that whole time. Like whenever she goes on her dates, she's wearing pink. So then this leads us into her going into the house. Just a note is that we never see her mother's face in this movie, because when she goes into the house, her mom is at the table, and she's always drinking wine. And there's a few scenes where she's there, but her face it's like either from behind or her face is like blurred out, which I didn't realize until my last watch. We could speculate about what happened to the dad, because, he's no longer in the picture. So it seems like he's probably dead. Like, I'm going to assume that he's dead. And, the mom is still dealing with it because she's just constantly drinking wine. And I feel like maybe there's a scene where she's passed out in bed with, like, maybe some pill bottles, but that could be me.
There was a scene. It was kind of confusing to me, but I didn't know if that was the mother. There's a scene of somebody's feet, and at first it looks like a bottle of wine on the dresser, but I believe it's actually like a supersized bottle of Jameson whiskey.
Oh, really?
That's what the label looked like to me.
Even worse. So that makes me wonder, like, how long ago did this happen? Because the kids seem okay with it. Like, they're not as distraught as her. So, like, what if it happened many years ago? I mean, I think that there's some... Right. If you look at pictures, like, you see the dad, and you see the kids, and I think that they're younger in the pictures, but the dad looks the way that he does at the end of the movie when you see him. So it's kind of like he never aged.
Right.
So you could theorize that he died when they were kids, and it's been a long time, and the mom has just been a wreck for years and years.
And because she's a wreck, does that lead to her children basically doing things they shouldn't be doing because they have not been guided? Does that go back to her having this mysterious date with the unknown guy? I really want to know how they met.
Yeah, now that you say that, now I'm just like, how did they meet? But, we're in the house, and Yara is reading a book on a shell. The Idiot. Yeah. So I was, like, looking up that book, because I was like, this has to have some kind of meaning, because everything has to have some kind of meaning. And from what I understand, the author of this book, the book itself, it's not necessarily related to the book, but more to the author. But the book, from what I read, is very structurally awkward, and people have said that it has a chaotic organization to it, which you could kind of say about this movie, the way that it's all put together with, like, the technology and the seasons and the clothes and everything just feeling off. But with the author, he was sentenced to die, and I think through like an execution, like a while back, and he was standing there, like in an execution line with a gun to his head, and he was about to be killed. And so he was standing there like, this is it, I'm going to be killed. Like, everything in him was like, this is my death. But at the last second, an order came through to keep him alive. And so they didn't kill him, and they let him go. And so that kind of stuck with him, and then I think that's when he went on to write this book. But I kind of felt like maybe that tied into the movie a little bit, like the feeling of the movie, maybe that dread that he felt that he's about to die and there was nothing he could do to escape it. And that's kind of like it following you, and you can't escape, and you know it's going to happen.
Right, so we could apply that to other things too. It follows. It's just not being able to escape. Knowing it's inevitable. Knowing whatever it may be, it's going to catch up with you.
Yeah.
Let's go back to when she left the hospital.
Uh-huh.
After she has left the hospital, that's when she's standing in the bathroom. That's when the ball hits the window, the red ball, and the kid is peeking in the window. And she has on a white, I guess, lycra tank top with matching white panties. And to me, it just felt like it was supposed to represent her innocence.
Uh-huh.
And maybe the red ball that hits the window, which was like one of those really amazing balls. Remember those balls in gym class?
Oh, God.
Like
Like
balls?
dodgeball?
Yes, the dodgeballs.
The balls I tried desperately to get away from.
Those very heavy, painful rubber balls. That's what hits her window. So to me, there was also something in that. Like, she's innocent. She's in her white. And she's actually looking down her underwear. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah, I remember, because I want to know, what is she looking at?
Right.
I have no theories.
Because, I mean, they have sex. Now she has whatever it is. So is she thinking, what is it? Is it down there?
Yeah, maybe there's going to be like something physical on her body.
Right. A change. But I felt that ball also represented something. I'm not for sure what. There's a reason that it's red and she's in white. But then also the next scene, in her room, she has a sandwich and chips. Like maybe her mother brought them into her because she's had such a rough time. And she's not eating it, obviously, because she feels traumatized. And I noticed that the chips looked like what we called tater skins back in the 80s. And
that
now
lovely
there's new
brown
ones.
and yellow packaging of the 80s.
Right. And now there's new ones called potato skins by TGI Friday or something. I pulled those up when I was doing my research because I thought, how old is a tato skin? Have they been sitting around for 20 years? But she hasn't eaten it. And we see later on, we see the same exact setup in her room, the sandwich and the chips, and she's not eating it. And then after the pool scene, after all that crazy stuff happens, we then see the sandwich and the chips, and they are eaten. They have been eaten. I think half of the sandwich is gone. So I couldn't really put together the pieces on that, but I felt like it was supposed to symbolize that something had changed in her, or, something had changed. Either she was more at ease, or she was giving up, but something made her eat the sandwich later on. So then I noticed they were playing Old Maid.
Oh, yeah.
They're on the porch, they're playing Old Maid. When I was 5, that was my favorite game. I loved Old Maid. I can't imagine playing it as a teenager or in early 20s or whatever age they're supposed to be. So to me, that represented innocence. That's like the most innocent game that they could be playing on the porch. It just tied back into that whole close-knit community. For example, when Paul's sitting with her on the couch and he says, oh, I haven't slept over here since I was a child. It lets you know that they've been friends their whole life. That he's been over there a lot.
Yeah.
They're very close.
Yeah, if you go back to the cards, you will notice that one of them has the old maid, like an old woman, and then in the next scene, that's when Jay is in class being chased by the old woman.
Ah. I didn't
So
put
those
that
go together. But yeah, go on.
Well, we can move on to the next scene in the classroom, which is, I immediately felt like we were in Halloween when Laurie is looking out the window and sees Michael Myers.
Yeah.
And she's looking out the window, too. And then also, I felt like Nightmare on Elm Street, when Nancy falls asleep in class, you hear the teacher talking about a famous piece of literature. I forget which one it is. I believe it's actually, there's a guy reading some Shakespeare in class. So in this movie, the teacher is reading a famous piece of literature, but I've already forgotten what it is. But I did recognize it at the time. So I felt like, again, those were just nods to other great horror classics, that they're just kind of recreating a scene.
Yeah, I do feel a lot of Halloween and some Nightmare on Elm Street in this movie, with the dream logic.
And I felt that the actress, Jay, she was reminiscent to me of a young Chloe Sevigny. Like, I felt like she's very, there was something, the character was meant to be very passive and naive, and at the same time, she doesn't have a lot of dialogue, so you don't really know what she's thinking.
Yeah.
And yeah, she just really reminded me of her a lot. I'm not for sure why exactly. But I kept feeling that same kind of vibe.
I love that actress, and I really, really can't wait to see her in something else that's good. She has a movie called Villains that I really want to see. I think it's kind of a horror thriller, and it looks interesting. So he named her Jay as a nod to Jamie Lee Curtis. So he did specifically give her that name because of that reason. I feel like there's some other characters that he named after Halloween characters.
Mm-hmm. Well, Paul was the boyfriend of, I can't think of her name, the one that gets killed in the car. That's what she's singing. Oh, Paul. I don't know. That's what she's singing. Some little song she's made up about Paul. I remember that. The other thing I noticed that was very Halloween was when Paul is on the couch watching TV, and he's watching some type of, it looks like Martian something 60s sci-fi.
Uh-huh.
In Halloween, they're watching The Thing. Lindsay, that's what she's watching on the couch. So I felt like that was a connection. Also, the TVs. I don't know if the TV is supposed to be a black and white TV, but it's kind of odd to... Well, first of all, it was kind of odd to have the 1970s TVs, and they had two of them, as if the larger one has gone out.
Oh, yeah.
And they have a smaller one on top.
It's weird.
And I just felt like that was a Halloween connection, because that's the type of TV Lindsay would have been watching in 1978 as she watched The Thing. I mean, what, again, Paul, what are you doing? Why are you watching this 1960s Martian movie? Isn't there anything else on TV?
I know. I was like, I would probably be so bored. Old movies in black and white, not my thing. Just not my thing.
Paul then tells her that he'll stay up all night and watch for anything weird. And that's pretty much what happens with Johnny Depp in Nightmare on Elm Street. I think Nancy asks him to stay up and watch. But, you know, there is that exchange. So I felt that was a nod again to Nightmare on Elm Street.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I noticed, though, which might tie into that feeling of what era are we in, is it kind of looked like Paul had on a hypercolor shirt, or hyper threads, or whatever you want to call them. Do you remember those shirts?
Oh,
You'd
yeah,
touch
I
them
do.
and they would change colors?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what it looks like he's wearing to bed. It's like
does.
a real light tie-dye.
Yeah. I never got to have one of those. I was always sad.
I had one.
Did you have one? Did it
Yeah,
actually
and
work?
Yeah. And I save as much of anything, all the things that I can. And I don't know if I saved that. It's kind of making me sad. I've been thinking about hypercolors ever since I saw Paul wearing that a couple nights ago when I did my rewatch. It's like, oh yeah, you just touch them. You could like put your hand on somebody's back.
Yeah.
And move your hand and it would change from like green to purple. That was a great invention. Great novelty.
I'm sure it'll be back soon, if it's not already, because the 90s are officially back in fashion.
Yes, I'm sure.
Mom jeans. Mom jeans everywhere. All right, we're getting so off topic here. What's our next subject?
Okay, so we don't see it kill. It just happens.
Yeah, so there's only two, there's a body count of 2 in this movie. And so the first kill in the intro, we don't see how she's killed exactly. And then the second kill is his name Greg, the neighbor boy?
I don't remember, yeah.
But, the woman comes in like looking like his mother.
Half naked mother.
Yeah, and so it's such a creepy scene, because from what we see of it, she gets on top of him, she's straddling him, and it looks sexual, and it's peeing this is like the second time we're seeing it peeing, because we saw it the first time in the kitchen, in Jay's kitchen, where it was also half naked and peeing with like no teeth. It's weird. And there's like, it is grabbing Greg's hand, and there's all this white stuff dripping down their hands. And I rewound that, and I was like, I don't understand what that is. I don't know what that is. And I'm kind of afraid to know what that is. But we only see it like kind of grinding on him and like peeing on him. And then it cuts back, I think, to Jay. And then when we come back to him, he's like dead. So I'm just really curious to know like how this thing is killing people.
I felt like it was eating his soul. Like when we see their hands connected, she's kind of bending his hand back and his arm into, you know, these awkward positions, which makes you think about the girl on the beach and her leg over her head.
Yeah.
But I felt like there's something happening where it is attracted to their energy, and it's something to do with, you know, it could be sexual, I guess, but it's something to do with connecting with their soul and then absorbing it for their own energy. That's all I could come up with.
Since it's passed through sex, do you think it kills with sex? Is it doing something to their, I don't know, is it doing something sexual to them, and that's why how it does it? I don't know.
Well, if you think about Rear Window, since you mentioned that, which is a suspense thriller, the basis is that he sees something. He believes he sees something, but no one else believes him. So that's kind of how I feel about this, is that, one, they're seeing something that's not there. You know, other people can't see it. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I mean, it can be applied to other things if you think about it being, how it's being passed along through sex, etc. Like, they can't see it. And therefore, we can't see stuff. We can't see the kill. Yeah. You know, these things are left for our interpretation. And we want to see, because there's lots of great panning effects throughout the whole movie, you know, where it feels like you're the voyeur. You know, you're across the street, slowly looking over top of her fence and into the pool. You know, so I feel like that's an ongoing theme, that we can't see things that we want to see.
Yeah. And then we cut to the next subject.
Well, I mean, as far as, before we get to the ending, but the pool, the second pool scene. So the pool they go to attempt to kill this thing, which is ridiculous. Why in the world do they think they can kill it? I mean, she did shoot it. It did fall down out on the beach. So maybe they feel that it can be killed. But it is changing form, so I don't know why they would think they could kill it.
The director said that it is the worst plan in the world because they're kids. So, right. Yeah, so go on.
So I felt like this pool, you know, the first time we see her in her above-ground pool in her backyard, that's a very comfortable, relaxed, safe place. So she's safe in the pool. So I feel like she thinks she's going to be safe in the pool. Even though it's a much bigger pool, she doesn't realize that this thing can pick up the TVs and everything and start throwing them at her.
True. So
I think there's a connection there. That's her safe place.
Yeah.
And earlier in the movie, we see that something has happened to her pool and all the water is gone. You know, the whole side is caved in. So it's like her safety is gone.
Yeah.
Foreshadowing. There was like 4 or 5 of them that I picked up on, little ones. But I think that's kind of supposed to be an empowering place for her. That she's safe, she can control it, but she obviously can't. We find out that she cannot control this thing once it's in the water. And even after they shoot it and the pool fills with water, it's just going to come back.
You mean
know, how much
blood?
time are you buying yourself? Oh, yes, with blood.
Yeah.
I mean, how much time does that buy them? Not much.
Yeah, because that brings me to how, like, can this thing be killed? Because it doesn't seem like anything affects it.
Right. Can it not be killed? So she then passes it on to Paul. Mm-hmm. And the way I viewed that was that Paul loved her. Paul's always been a part of her life. Paul is safe. She doesn't feel like a creep for passing it on to a stranger. Paul knows what he's getting himself into. And then we see them walking through their suburb holding hands, and it is following them.
Well, something's following them, but we don't know if it is it. It's left to be ambiguous. But it does seem like it could be it.
Right. So how did you feel with that ending? Were you satisfied?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I liked it because, again, it's like you don't really know what happened. And then there's the scene where Paul is like passing like the sex workers because he's thinking about passing it on. So I don't know. That just starts to make you think about how you would handle it if you were in that situation.
So I think what I would do is, because I'm completely, I have too much anxiety of the unknown, like in a situation like this. I don't think I could pass it on. I think I would just continually run from it, because if I passed it on, there's this whole unknown of, did that person pass it on?
Yeah, you can never be comfortable.
Not? Right. Are they going to be killed soon and then it's going to appear? I'd rather just know that it's still with me and continually dodge it. So if I were continually dodging it...
Like an action movie with A.B. Ketchum.
I would want to travel, right? Like my whole life would become traveling, because then I would have a true purpose to keep moving. You know, I would have to. Mm-hmm. So I would probably just shape my life around traveling and seeing the world and being aware that you just have to keep moving, that it's near.
Yeah.
Because if you pass it on, there's that whole unknown of, did they pass it on, or did they just die and now it's going to show up at my door and I don't realize it because now I've been comfortable for 5 years. You know, unless you had a real master plan to like pass it on through like 10 people very quickly, and just, you know, try to really get it far away from you. But I think the safest bet is to just know it's with you, or like with her and Paul, you know, have a partner who has agreed to take it from you, which really doesn't help you much. But you two together as a team know it's near you, and you can travel and stay ahead of it.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you can kill it based on what we saw.
Yeah. It's there forever, it seems. Because I had a similar plan as you when I thought about it. Like, I thought about it forever when the movie ended. I was like going online, reading everybody's theories, like how would you survive? You know, because it's like, I was trying to calculate like the speed, because if I went to another country and it's just walking to me, then that gives me a certain amount of time. But then the director said that it could get on an airplane, so that kind of throws that out the window. Like, but I did have that similar kind of feeling. But then I started to think about it like logically, where like if this thing is constantly after you, then you could never hold a job because you can't stay in one place. So then you're like poor, so you don't have any money because you can't bring in any money. So that led me to like a new way of dealing with it, which I thought of today, which would be, drumroll, my latest way of dealing with it would be to become a sex worker, because the sex would pass it on and I would also get paid for it. So I would be killing like 2 birds with 1 stone, and I could travel and get paid. So that's like the best option I can come up with.
That's brilliant. I like that.
So the last thing for me on my page is to talk about to have a sequel or not, but we can go into your big theory if you would like.
I'm so excited to give my interpretation. Towards the end of the movie, one of the characters mentions 8 Mile, and at that moment, we then know that they are in Detroit. 8 Mile is a divider between the city and the suburbs. The story is based in the suburbs, and all havoc breaks loose when our main character, Jay, goes to the city. When she goes to the city to watch the movie, that is when Jeff sees a girl following him. And after Jay and Jeff have sex and he puts her in the wheelchair and takes her into the abandoned factory, we also know at that point that they are in Detroit. So Detroit is a city of urban decay. It's a dangerous city. It's one of the saddest stories in America, how they deindustrialized and they had a complete economic breakdown. High crime, high poverty. It goes on, and it's a place where those that live in the suburbs are told not to go. So when Jay goes to the city, bad things happen. When Jay goes to the water, bad things happen. The Detroit River divides the city from the suburbs. So to me, this is a story of urban decay and suburban dread that the urban decay will make it into the suburbs. And that's exactly what happens. Jay goes to the city. She brings it back with her to the suburbs. I think this is a part of why we have confusion with time and eras. It just feels overall confusing. We see inside their house they have nice new chrome kitchen appliances, yet they have TVs from the 70s. Some people are driving 80s cars while others have brand new cars. I think it's to represent what's happening, the decay, that everything is not brand new and perfect. We see this in her pool. They show that the water has left the pool, her luxury, her safe place. It changes. It's no longer a pool. It's just a plastic liner lying in her backyard. I can go a lot deeper. Maybe we'll save that for an extra tidbit later that we'll offer on our website. But for now, that is my observation.
So if that's it, then the last question that I have is, should there be a sequel? And what would they do in the sequel? Because there is talk about there being a sequel, so the writer has said that he's got some ideas and he could be open to it. Is that a good idea? Should we leave it where it is? Should we continue the story? What do you think?
I think the only way that they could really continue the story is if they have a way to kill it, or if they can, show us more, if they can show us how it's killing them. If we can never kill this thing, then that would just lead our characters to leaving the city, going to other cities, running from it. And how often how many movies do we want to see of people just running from something? They'd have to show us more.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about it because I want to see more of this world, but at the same time, if they give me too many details, it might start to not make sense, and then I might not like it. Maybe I don't like the backstory of how this thing came to be. And sequels are never as good as the original. Because it feels like they often just try to recreate what they did good about, what they did best about the first one. And they're just kind of repeating things. And then it's just, if there's some original thing that he could do, maybe it could work. But yeah, I have mixed feelings. And that's it for our discussion about It Follows. I personally love this movie. It's one of my favorite modern horror movies. I loved it from the second that I saw it. And it's great to discuss it with somebody else.
Should we rate it?
I hate a 1 to 10 scale. I'm weird. I like a 1 to 3 scale. And so 1 means that it's horrible. We don't want to watch it again. 2 means that it was okay. Maybe we enjoyed it, but we don't really need to watch it again. And then 3 means that we really liked it and we could probably watch it over and over again. Keep it simple. And so for me, I would give it a 3. I love this movie. It's one of my favorites.
And it took multiple watches for me, but I would also give it a 3. I feel it's very artistic. It's very different, unique, and it did earn 3 awards from us. So that's pretty special.
It was best opening scene, best kill, best soundtrack, right? 3 awards from us in one movie. Good job, It Follows.
Woohoo!
The end.
Good job. You've been listening to the AA Horror Highway. Be sure to tune in next week when we discuss Jennifer's Body from 2009, starring Megan Fox and Amanda Seyfried. I'm Amy Ketchum.
And I'm Amy Casio.
And we'll see you next week. Connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or Patreon at AA Horror Highway. Find us on Twitter at Horror Highway, that's Horror HWY. Also, be sure to take a moment and rate and review us on iTunes. You can find all of our social media links and more by going to horrorhighway.com. That's horrorhwy.com.